Hello everyone. This is a brief summary of today's lecture, meninges, cerebrum, and white fibers. So here is the learning outcomes. You need to know about meninges and layers, meninges and related species. Second part will be related to brain morphology, cerebral, the cerebral morphology and including surface borders, loops, and pools. Also, you need to know about the main sulci and the gyri in each cerebral hemisphere and related motor sensor and association area and clinical relevance. The third part is related to the white fibers, which could be association, commissural, and projection. Here is the meninges of the brain, where you can find here the three layers which covers the brain from inside to outside. The innermost layer is this layer which is pink in color is pia mater. The second layer here is conoid, and the green color area is dura mater or outermost layer. This dura mater is divided into two layers. Meningeal layer, which is the green one, and another layer which is called endosteal layer, which covers the bone from inside. The dura mater is tough and is supplied by middle meningeal vessels, as you see here, middle meningeal artery and vein. And this dura mater is, or hard muscle, is forming folds here, like later I will tell you. So here is dura mater here, and here is the second layer, which is arachnoid, and then under it you can find the pia mater. So here is the dural folds, which are formed by dura mater. Mater here means, or mater means mother. Dura means heart. Okay, so it forms basically three or four folds. One here is sickle-shaped here, which separates the two cerebral hemispheres. We call it falx cerebri. This one, falx cerebri, and it has upper border and lower border. And its upper border includes venous sinus, we call it superior sagittal sinus. Lower border contains the inferior sagittal sinus. And the second layer here, it's U-shape or tent shape. We call it tentorium cerebelli, which separates the cerebrum above from cerebellum below. The third layer here, we call it diaphragma celli, which covers the pituitary gland. And the last layer here, we call it falx cerebelli, or falx cerebelli, which separates the two cerebral hemispheres. This one. There is a space between these dural folds. I mean, between spaces between the meninges. This coronal section, which is showing the skull here, for example, skull as a bone here, and outside here there is here you can find the skull here. Okay, so here is the skull, and here is the brain. For example, frontal lobe here. Here is the gray matter and there is white matter, and you can find the three layers of the meninges, which are from outside to inside. Brown one here is dura, green is arachnoid, and the innermost one is pia mater here. So you can find space, we call it subarachnoid space here, which is found between the arachnoid and pia mater, and this subarachnoid space, this one here, or SA, contains CSF or cerebrospinal fluid. There is another space between the dura and the bone here. This space is called extradural space. and this space contains the meningeal vessels, the meningeal artery and vein, which supplies the dura. Okay. Also, you can see in the here, as I mentioned, here is the falx cerebri, okay, which separates the right and the left cerebral hemispheres. And this falx cerebri contains this sinus, which is called superior sagittal sinus along this upper border. And this sinus here is invaded by what's called arachnoid villi. Arachnoid villi, which are extensions from arachnoid, and to drain CSF to the superior sagittal sinus. Here is just sagittal section showing the circulation of CSF within the brain ventricle. Here is the lateral ventricle here, for example, and here's this plexus called choroid plexus, which forms the CSF. So CSF is drained from the ventricles, from lateral to third, to the midbrain canal or subaqueduct, to the fourth ventricle here, and then to the subarachnoid space around spinal cord. So you have to know that the subarachnoid space also is found around some spinal cord. So here is the clinical importance of subarachnoid space, where we can inject a needle here to to take sample of CSF for diagnosis, or you can inject some drugs or local anesthesia to block sensation when you are doing, for example, cesarean section, for example. So and also in the, as I mentioned here, in the extraoral space between the dura and the bone, it could be containing the meningeal metameningeal vessels, and in case of fracture of the bone, see here at terion here, so there is extradural hematoma or hemorrhage. Okay. Here is some question you answer by yourself. Next part will be the cerebrum. As you see here, you have there is two cerebral hemispheres. His left one, his right one, and here's the left one, and they are separated by what's called median or greater longitudinal fissure here. Okay, and the two cerebral hemispheres are connected by this band of white fibers, which is called corpus callosum. Okay, corpus callosum here. So if you look here, if you cut the cerebrum here at corpus callosum here, you can find this section, which is sagittal section, and you can find here the corpus callosum here. Okay. Here also, when you cut the brain like this coronal section, also you can find here the right cerebral hemisphere, and here is the left one, and you can find here the cavity inside the cerebrum, for example, here lateral ventricle, for example, and you can find here is the brain stem, midbrain, bones, and medulla here. You can find here frontal lobe, for example. Next we'll talk about the cerebral surfaces. So here is the lateral surface, and here is the medial surface, characterized by presence of this band of fibers, which is called corpus callosum. Lateral surface, medial surface, and also there is inferior surface here. As I mentioned before, the cerebrum has cortex outside, and white gray matter outside. It's called cortex here, and inside there is white matter, which formed of fibers. Also, you can find here that the cortex here is folded here. These folds are called sulci or grooves, and between them you can find elevations, which are called gyri. So basically, you need to know three important sulci. One here called central sulcus, this one, and one here is called the lateral sulcus. And another one here, we call it parieto-occipital sulcus. Is this one, parieto occipital sulcus, which is found mainly on the medial surface. So here lateral surface is the medial surface. This three sulci, central here, lateral here, and parieto-occipital here, divides the cerebrum into four lobes. Frontal lobe in front of central sulcus, parietal lobe behind the central sulcus, temporal lobe below the central sulcus, and occipital lobe here between the parieto-occipital and here, or behind the parieto-occipital here. Okay. Here is the sulci and related gyri. So the name of gyri are mainly related, or of course, these gyri or elevations named according to their position with the sulci. So first we need to know about the lateral sulcus here, this one, lateral sulcus here. Sorry, central sulcus here. So central sulcus here is found at the superior border here of the cerebral hemisphere. It's found about ½ inch or 1 centimeter behind the midpoint between the frontal and occipital poles of the brain. And this sulcus is important because it is also continuous on the medial surface. And the area on the medial surface around this central sulcus is called paracentral view. So that's central sulcus. So in front of it, you can find the frontal lobe. Behind it, you can find the parietal lobe. Another sulcus is lateral sulcus, this one, or lateral fissure, which separate frontal lobe from temporal lobe below it here. There are so many sulci in the here, for example, in the frontal lobe you can find here superior and the middle frontal sulci, and between them you can find superior, middle, and inferior frontal gyri. So again, here in the frontal lobe you can find superior and inferior frontal sulci. Between them you can find superior, middle, and inferior frontal gyri. For example, in the temporal lobe here you can find superior temporal sulcus, inferior temporal sulcus. Between them you can find superior, middle, and inferior temporal gyri, and so on. So you don't need to memorize all these, but just memorize the most important sulci like central sulcus and lateral sulcus, and also parieto-occipital sulcus. Here is the medial surface, for example. You can find on the medial surface here. By the way, sulci are underlined by red color, and the gyri are framed by violet color here, like previous slide here, for example. For example, here is the corpus callosum. Above it, you can find the callosal sulcus. And then above callosal sulcus, you can find this gyrus, which is called cingulate gyrus. Cingulate gyrus, this one. Also here you can find here, for example, parieto-occipital sulcus here, and then you find this sulcus, it's important. We call it calcarine sulcus. This one, calcarine sulcus. And the area between parieto-occipital sulcus and calcarine is called cuneus here. It's part of occipital. Okay. As you look here, okay, next is inferior surface here. You can find here orbital part and here stentorial part. In the orbital part, you can find, for example, H-shaped sulcus here, and also you can find the olfactory sulcus. And here is the tentorial part. You can find, for example, some sulci like collateral sulcus and occipitotemporal sulcus, and between them you can find some gyri like middle and lateral occipitotemporal gyri, and also hippocampal gyrus here. Okay. Here is the functional brain area, which are important to know. So here is the central sulcus again. So here is frontal lobe, here is parietal lobe, here is temporal lobe, and here is occipital. Here is the central sulcus. In front of central sulcus, there is area. This is the gyrus, which is called precentral gyrus here. This precentral gyrus contains area 4. Area 4 is the primary motor area, okay, which controls the muscles or skeletal muscles or controls the movements of opposite side of or contralateral side of the body. So this area 4 uh, or damage of area 4 here results in paralysis or weakness of the contralateral side of the body. We call it contralateral hemiplegia, which is upper motor neuron lesion. Also, you can here there is in the frontal lobe. Also, you can find another motor area like motor speech area here, premotor area here, and frontal eye field area. All these are motor area. So, for example, Broca's area here. It is in the frontal lobe in the anterior part of inferior frontal gyrus. This motor speech area or Broca's area is important to for formation of words. Okay, so it means it's controlling the muscles which control speech, like muscles of tongue, larynx and face. So damage to this area results in expressive or motor aphasia, where the patient has difficulty or to produce speech. Okay, but he or she can understand the meaning of words, which could be written words or spoken words. Okay, so the difficulty here in to produce or to articulate, to produce speech, okay, or to articulate. Okay, that's why it's called the motor or expressive aphasia. Okay. The area 6 is called premotor area or secondary motor area. It's important for planning of the movement performed by motor area 4 or planning of the movement of skeletal muscles. Area 8 is frontal field area or frontal eye area, which it's important for controlling the movement, conjugate movement of the eye muscles, especially to the opposite side. Parietal loop here contain here again here is the central sulcus. So the blue area behind or posterior to the central sulcus here in the parietal loop is called primary somatosensory area or primary sensory area 312, which are important to receive sensation from the opposite side of the body. That's why damage to this area results in loss of sensation from opposite side of the body, or you can say contralateral sensory disturbance or contralateral sensories of sensation, like pain and temperature. If you look here to the temporal loop, the temporal loop contains important area here, which is called primary auditory area or area 4142, which is important for, of course, it's found here in the upper part of superior temporal gyrus, just below the lateral sulcus, and damage to this area results in deafness, especially if it is bilateral. There is also second auditory area, okay, which is also important for hearing. There is area called here, and also here is this area is called Wernicke area or Wernicke area, which is found here in the close to the primary sensory area here, primary auditory area. So it's found here in the posterior part of the superior temporal gyrus, and also including this part which is called angular gyrus, which is part of the parietal loop. This area here, Wernicke area, is important for understanding of spoken speech. Okay, understanding of the speech. So means damage to this area results in receptive or sensory aphasia, where the patient can articulate or can, but he has the patient lost the ability to understand spoken or written language, although he speak fluently. Okay, that's all. Uh, Occipital loop here. Here is the medial surface. Occipital loop here. Uh, as I mentioned before, there is important sulcus here on the medial surface of occipital loop. We call it calcarine sulcus. This sulcus around it, you can find area 17, which is primary visual area here. And this area is important for vision. Damage to this area results in contralateral homonymous hemianopia. Around it, area 18 and 19, this area is called visual association area. Okay, and it's important to recognize what you can see by primary visual area. Here is the coronal section I saw of the here right cerebral hemisphere. Here is left. So here is the lateral surface. So here is the motor and sensory homunculus, where you can find here, for example, here is motor homunculus, homunculi or motor homunculus here, where you can find that here is the beat central gyrus and here is the primary motor area 4. But here is your body is the body is represented upside down, where the face is down and the lower limb is up here. So you can find here, for example, here is the area of controlling the tongue muscles, area controlling the facial muscles, area controlling the hand muscles, and so on. Here is the medial surface where the motor area for which controls the muscles of leg and also of muscles of, you can see, lower limb and the muscles of perineum. Here is the primary somatosensory area, also which receives sensation. And here is again the body also presents upside down, and that's all. So this is cortical representation of motor of the body muscles here, and also and the cortical representation also of the sensory area which receives sensation from the contralateral side of the body. Here is another loop, we call it insula, which is hidden loop found inside the lips of, it's exposed when you separate the lips of lateral sulcus, and this insula is important for sensation of taste or gustatory function and also smell. And when you make a coronal section like this, coronal section, you can see here is the insula here on the lateral side, just under the or close to the lateral surface of the cerebral hemisphere. Here is a question you can answer by yourself. So next part will be related to the brain fibers. Again, here is coronal section. So here is the again, here is the right cerebral hemisphere. Here is the left one. Here is the gray matter, and there is white matter. Okay. So here is the lateral surface. Here is the medial surface, and gray matter here contain mainly cells, motor cells, for example, or sensory cells. And white matter contain mainly, it's formed by the axons of these cells and also fibers which connect the cerebral hemispheres together. Inside the white matter also you can find here some masses of gray matter, like for example here is right and left thalami, here is lentiform nucleus, here is caudate nucleus, and also you can find inside the cerebral hemisphere the spaces which is called ventricles, like lateral ventricle here, third ventricle here, and here is a cerebral aqueduct. Here is the fourth ventricle between cerebellum here and brainstem. Here is the brainstem, midbrain, pons, and the medulla, and then below here is the spinal cord. So to classify the white fibers of the cerebral hemisphere. They can divide into association fibers, blue color here, which connect which connect certain area in the same cerebral hemisphere, right or left, like this one, for example, this U-shaped fibers. Okay. Also, there is this is called short association fibers, and then there are this short association like this one. We call it intercrural fibers. Okay, intercrural fibers and subcortical fibers. Okay. This is also long association fibers, is like later I will show you. But second type of association fibers is commissural fibers. Sorry, second type of white fibers is commissural fibers, which are green in color here, like corpus callosum, for example, which connect the two cerebral hemispheres together. The third fibers, which red in color here, we call it projection fibers, which connect the cerebral hemisphere with the our cerebrum with the brainstem and spinal cord. Okay, this projection fiber could be ascending or descending. Ascending means sensory, descending means motor. So here is example of long association fibers, like for example, uncinate fasciculus here. Sorry, this not this one is arcuate fasciculus. Arcuate fasciculus. This one, okay, which connect motor speech area or Broca's area with Wernicke area or Wernicke or sensor speech area, and this arcuate fasciculus is important for connection of motor speech area and Wernicke area or Wernicke area, and damage of this fasciculus produce or results in global aphasia, motor and sensory aphasia. Other long association fibers include, for example, uncinate fasciculus, this one, for example, here, which connects the frontal with temporal loops, uncinate fasciculus, for example, superior longitudinal fasciculus, and this fasciculus, which is called cingulum. This cingulum is within the cingulate gyrus. Okay, and also that's all for long association fibers. There's also another fasciculus or fibers called the inferior longitudinal fasciculus. This one. The most important commissural fibers are corpus callosum, as you see here. So here is the corpus callosum here, and when you cut the corpus callosum here, you can find the medial surface here, and the corpus callosum here, like this one. Okay, but there is another, there is additional commissural fibers, anterior commissure, for example, posterior commissure, aponeural commissure, and hippocampal commissure or commissure of the fornix. Okay, commissure of the fornix. So we will discuss the corpus callosum. Corpus callosum here is formed of different parts. For example, here is the lower part here, we call it rostrum here, rostrum. This bend, we call it geno of corpus callosum or genie of corpus callosum here, and then body of corpus callosum, and then splenium of corpus callosum. So that is the four divisions of corpus callosum. Okay, so rostrum, geno, and body, and splenium. If you make like horizontal section like this one, like this horizontal section passing through the from frontal to occipital lobe, so you can find the anterior fibers of the geno is called forceps minor. Posterior fibers of splenium, we call it forceps major, and also there is lateral fibers from the body here, we call it tabitum. Okay. Damage of the corpus callosum results in split brain syndrome. Projection fibers here, as you see here, here is the Again, coronal section. Here is the lateral surface, and here is the medial surface. So here is the corona radiata, which are axons of cells here in the cortex here. And this corona radiata is fan shaped, and this corona radiata go down and or descend downward here, forming what's in band of fibers. We call it internal capsule. And this internal capsule is going downward to the midbrain here, and then bones, and then to the spine, to the lower, to the medulla oblongata, where it cross the fibers make cross here to go to the other side or contralateral side of spinal cord anterior horn cells. So these fibers are called projection fibers. And these fibers could be motor, could be sensory, and they form the tracts, which could be motor or sensory. Okay, motor when they go when from cortex to the spinal cord, sensory from spinal cord to the cerebral cortex. These projection fibers here, for example, they descend downward between the nuclei, or between masses of gray matter like thalamus here, caudate nucleus here, or lentiform nucleus here. So when you do like horizontal section, you can find that you can detect the internal capsule here. So internal capsule here, it's L shape here. Okay, it's L shape. This internal capsule here, it's has anterior limb here, has between caudate nucleus here and the lentiform nucleus here. The posterior limb here between the thalamus here and the lentiform nucleus, is posterior limb. The anterior limb meets the posterior limb here at the genu of lentiform nucleus, genu of internal capsule. So there is additional parts here of internal capsule here, retrolenticular part, which arise from the medial geniculate body of the thalamus, going to the auditory area in the cortex, and it's called sublenticular part or auditory radiation. The retrolenticular part of internal capsule called optic radiation from lateral geniculate body of the thalamus to area 17 in the or primary visual area in occipital loop. So fibers in the anterior limb of internal capsule are called thalamocortical fibers and frontopontine fibers. Fibers in the genu of internal capsule are called corticobulbar or corticonuclear fibers, which descend to the nuclei of cranial nerves controlling the muscles of face, pharynx, and the palate. Posterior limb contain corticospinal fibers and fibers of or thalamocortical fibers, which could be descending or ascending, and of course the descending fibers or corticospinal tract, which control the opposite or muscles of the opposite side of the body. That's why damage of posterior limb of internal capsule will cause contralateral hemiplegia, same like damage to area 4, as I mentioned before. Here, I think that's enough. So again, if you look here, this section, horizontal section of the brain, so you can find here is frontal lobe, here is occipital lobe. You can find here is the corpus callosum and genu, or you can say rostrum of corpus callosum. Here is a splenium, and you can find here is the L-shaped internal capsule. Here is the anterior limb here, okay, between caudate nucleus and lentiform. Here is the posterior limb here, this one, between the lentiform nucleus and thalamus here. Between them, you can find the genu of internal capsule. Okay, I think that's enough for here for this section. So you can see also the same section here as in MRI. Okay, and you can find here the internal capsule here, or internal capsule here looks dark gray in color here, dark gray in color here, between the masses of gray matter here, like caudate nucleus here, lentiform, and here is the thalamus. And of course, inside here you can find this very dark color here. That is the ventricles of the brain. It's a very black color here. That is the ventricles of the brain, which contains the CSF, or cerebrospinal fluid. Here is, you can test yourself here. Okay. Basically, these sections, here is horizontal section, and here is the sagittal section showing the various types of brain fibers, which could be commissural or projection or association fibers. Example of association fibers here, these fibers here, we call it this one here, which is D, which is fornix. Fornix is association fibers which connect the hippocampus to the mammillary body in the hypothalamus. So this is fornix. Okay. Above the fornix here you can find the corpus callosum. This L-shaped white matter here you can see here, it is the internal capsule, and here is anterior limb, here is posterior limb, and here is the genu of corpus callosum. This is white, dark. This masses of gray matter is basal nuclei or basal ganglia, like caudate nucleus and here lentiform, and of course this masses of gray matter is thalamus. Here is the important link to study the sections of the brain. It's good to study these sections through this link, and it's provided by me and also by the help of e-learning portal. Here's some questions you can answer by yourself. Here are references mainly from Snell Anatomy and other resources